Nona Jones, welcome. I am so excited and just really grateful to have you here.
Oh, this is my pleasure and privilege. Thanks for having me.
I have to tell you, we're doing something a little bit unusual today, and that's that we're filming not one but two workshops with you. And the reason for that is when we signed you on as a faculty member, first of all, I fangirled. I just want you to know that because you truly are just such a remarkable woman. But I felt like one workshop just wouldn't do you justice because you are serving and leading and basically taking over the world in a number of arenas. And so I'm excited to hear from you on multiple fronts. I wanted to ask if you would mind just sharing a little bit about who you are and all the exciting things that you're up to.
Sure. Well, let me just first say that I'm so just honored and impressed by your vision for this. And so just thank you for inviting me to be a part of it. I think the idea of equipping and empowering women is just so important, especially in this day and age. I typically just use 5 words to describe myself as a statistically improbable product of grace, because I think many times people see, the end result and they assume that that's the whole story. But today I'm married to my best friend. He's my husband and my pastor. We lead a local church together. And I have 2 little boys. They're 10 and 7 years old. In addition to that, I work for this small tech startup. It's just pretty new. You may have heard of it. It's called Facebook. It's a couple people.
Little company.
Yeah,
No
we're
big
testing
deal.
a couple
No
products.
big deal.
No big deal. But I lead faith partnerships at Facebook, which is, it's not just a job for me. It truly is a calling. I love what I get to do. I've written a couple of books as well. I get to preach the gospel around the world. But I think in terms of passion, the book that I wrote called Success from the Inside Out tells my story about how I overcame a childhood of sexual abuse, physical, emotional, mental, psychological, all of it. Tried to take my life twice at very young ages. And God has redeemed my story. And so I think what I'm most passionate about now is just getting to speak into the hearts and minds of other women and even men and encourage them to know that no matter what's happened to you, no matter what you've done, no matter what you've been through, that God can turn pain into purpose. So that's why I'm glad to be here.
I'm so glad that you shared a little bit about your career. And one thing I wanted to ask you, I think sometimes when we talk about topics such as business and career development and finance, there's a false notion that those things can exist in opposition to our spiritual health, or that somehow they work counter to our faith. As you juggle so many things, including your faith, including your livelihood as a tremendous business woman, how do you reconcile those 2 areas of your life?
Well, it's exactly that. Like I don't live a compartmentalized life. I don't have a church Nona and a Facebook Nona and a preaching Nona. I am the same Nona in all those environments. And the reason for that is actually biblical. I mean, if you look at the creation story and you look at what God said to Adam and Eve when, he gave them charge over the garden, he used some very interesting language. He basically told them to have dominion, to subdue. He told them to lead. And so what that communicated to me is that every arena that God allows our foot to occupy, whether it's in the office, in the home, in the grocery store, that is territory that he has given to us to lead and take for his kingdom. And so, if I'm in the office at Facebook, I consider myself to be an ambassador for Christ there. When I'm in my home with my children, I consider myself to be an ambassador for Christ there. I think it's not about, trying to keep faith, in a shelf on a corner in the back of our mind. It's who we are. It's our identity. And so that's how I tend to live my life. I don't try to pretend that I'm not a Christian when I'm in spaces that aren't necessarily for faith, because I believe God put me there to represent him, and that's how we have to live our life.
That's powerful, and especially for women, because one thing I think that's so special about women is we all juggle so many different things. And so recognizing that whether you're in the workplace, or again, I always say I'm in a season right now that I'm at home with babies, or whatever space that we're in, recognizing the calling that's in that, and you do that so well. in the professional arena, in a number of arenas, but I would imagine, especially in the business space, there are some challenges that are really unique to women. And I wanted to ask you that in your experience, were there any obstacles or hardships that you faced simply for the fact that you are a woman, maybe more specifically being a woman of color, that you faced and that you overcame? And to add to that, what encouragement could you maybe offer to young women, young girls who have hopes, they have dreams, they have aspirations, but as they survey the spaces that they want to step into, they're not seeing a lot of faces that look like theirs?
Yeah, this is real. So I'll talk about it along two dimensions. So there's the challenge of being a woman in a business environment, and then the challenge of being a Black woman in particular in a business environment. So I think being a woman presents a challenge because, it's true, as you look, up the hierarchy, it gets fewer and fewer. You see fewer and fewer people who look like you. And I think it becomes hard because decisions are typically made at those higher levels that affect you. And if you're not invited to those tables, then what matters to you as a woman is oftentimes overlooked. And so I think what I've learned to do is I've learned to value my voice. You're going to find that as you progress in your career, especially as a young woman, there will be people who will automatically assume because you are a woman that you don't have anything worth listening to. But I think that's when you have to determine, I own my voice. I do have something of value. There's this practice of diversity and inclusion that is celebrated not just in the secular environments, but also in ministries. But what I've said is this idea of inclusion can sometimes feel passive. It's like, okay, let me wait for somebody to include me. What I encourage people to do is don't wait to be invited to the table. If you're not invited to the table, pull up a chair. If there are no chairs, stand by the table. You have the right, you deserve to be there. I think as a Black woman in particular, some of the challenges I've had to overcome is there is this perception that as a Black woman, you're angry, and if you're passionate about something, then somehow you're being negative about it. And so I've had to overcome that. I actually had somebody once tell me, because I was very passionate about a decision that was being made, and I voiced that, and they pulled me aside after the meeting and they said, you really should pick your battles. And I thought that was interesting because what they were trying to do was they were trying to diminish the fact that it was important to me because it wasn't important to them.
Right.
And so my response to them was, I do pick my battles. And that's why I'm fighting, because this is a battle that's worth fighting for. So I think we have to just own our voice. Don't allow others to diminish you. You deserve to be at the table. Any table you are at, you deserve to be there. And if you're not at that table, pull up a chair.
Well, Nona, I so admire how you've courageously stepped forward in this capacity. And I think even more than that, what an opportunity that you have and that you're taking advantage of to kind of reach behind you and help other women along the way. And that's such a heart that we have here at Influencer Group, recognizing some of the challenges that exist and the disparities that exist, and just getting to learn and draw from incredible women like yourself. You share very honestly and truthfully, you've alluded to it a little bit earlier, just about your history with trauma. And trauma it's so dynamic. It takes on many faces. It's something that we really all face in some capacity, and it can be something that sadly can really hinder our ability, or maybe even our confidence in ourselves when it comes to walking in obedience and stepping into the roles that God is asking us to step into. And I wanted to ask what encouragement you could offer, what hope can you offer for women who are processing through trauma and want to know that there is hope, that as you say, they can step from trauma to triumph?
Yeah. Well, I would say my life is just a living example of that. And the reality is trauma is something that many of us try to overlook. We try to speed past. We say things like, oh, that was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I'm over it. When in fact, trauma changes the way that we see the world. It changes the way we see ourselves. And I think to give people a sense of hope is realize this: no matter what has happened to you, no matter what you've even done, that does not invalidate your purpose. God created all of us on purpose, with purpose. And there is hope and there is healing. The thing that I had to learn, and this was the difficult part of trauma, I had to realize that healing is a choice. And this sounds strange, especially someone like me who endured very difficult levels of sexual and physical and emotional and mental abuse. But I realized that the trauma only had the power that I gave it after the fact, you know? And that was hard because I think as someone who has survived trauma, the tendency is to look to the past, and if that didn't happen, things would be different. And even to think, well, if they would apologize, things would be different. But there's no power in an apology. There just isn't. I remember the day that my abuser actually apologized to me. I didn't receive freedom that moment. I received freedom when I chose to forgive him for what he did. And the power lied within me. So the hope is this. There's nothing on the outside of you that you're waiting on to heal. It's on the inside of us. And God gave us that power, which is why I talk about it so frequently, because that's what I discovered.
Right. And I love what you said just about the power of choice. When we go through trauma, sometimes we feel so out of control. Yeah. But the Bible says one of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control.
Yes. Yeah.
And so when we turn to Scripture, we recognize that God has afforded us some degree of choice. And oftentimes with trauma or with these painful circumstances that we endure, there's a lot of things that we don't necessarily have a say in. We don't have choice. You know, we're not always in control of our circumstances, but we have the ability, like you said, to powerfully say, what choices has God put before me today? And how can I choose courageously? How can I choose in a way that honors him?
Well, and that doesn't invalidate what happened.
Exactly,
and that's the thing. Like,
exactly.
What happened was wrong. Like that, it was wrong. What happened was painful. I think the power, though, is that recognition. There was a gentleman, and I think many people have probably heard his story. He was imprisoned in a camp during the Holocaust, and he lost his wife, he lost his family, he lost absolutely everything. His story is chronicled in A Man's Search for Meaning, but he lost absolutely everything. He was employed in the task of shoveling out the burnt remains of Jews who were burned in the gas ovens. Like unimaginable, right? And he makes a statement. His name is Dr. Viktor Frankl. He makes a statement in his book. He said, I realized in the midst of this moment where I didn't know if I was going to live within the next 5 minutes. I didn't know if they were going to come grab me and throw me in the gas ovens. He said, I realized that no matter what anybody did to me, no matter what they took from me, there was one thing that they could never take from me. They could not take away the power to decide how I would be affected by what they did.
Wow.
That is so powerful, and it's so freeing, because the reality is the circumstance was horrific. It was wrong. Should have never happened. And yet he still in the middle of it had the power to decide how to be affected by it. So to me, that's the hope. The hope is no matter what happened, no matter how hard it was, no matter how painful it was, nobody can take my power to choose how to be affected by it.
Amen. Well, the last question I wanted to ask you, you're going to lead one workshop called Killing Comparison, which I love that title. And you know, we're in this social media era where we catch ourselves scrolling away.
Yeah.
And it is so easy to fall into the comparison trap, to say, oh, look at her relationship, look at her career, look at her house, look at her body, look at her skin, look at how well behaved her children are, what have you. Why is it so important that we kill comparison? What is the value in that?
You know, it's personal for me, and that's why I'm excited about this workshop. It was something that God revealed I needed to work on, and I think it's important because many times we're comparing what's happening in our life to the highlight reel other people are showing on social media, right? Like I often say, you know, we post the day that we got the car. We don't post the day it got repossessed, right?
Yes.
We post the day that we
down on the side of the street.
on the side of the
Not on
street.
the timeline.
It's a mess. Nope, not at all. We post about, you know, what the day our boyfriend, you know, proposed to us.
Right.
But we don't post about the day he asked for a divorce. And so what happens is we end up comparing our reality to somebody else's fiction. And I think that's the power of comparison is it ends up tarnishing the value that you see in yourself. And we know that we're fearfully and wonderfully made, but as long as we keep this fiction, this highlight reel before our eyes, we will continue to think that we are deficient by comparison. So that's why I'm excited about the workshop. And I'm just grateful that you're allowing me to even do it, because I think if we can kill comparison, we can go on to do some incredible things in this world and experience the fruit of the Spirit. And I think that's been robbed from many of us for far too long.
Well, Nona, thank you so much. I am so excited. It's hard to contain my excitement as far as just what the women in our audience are going to be able to glean from you. So just so looking forward to that, and just want you to know how thankful I am for your life, for your testimony, for your ministry. And I hope that you know how many women truly are in your corner, women that you maybe don't even know, but we're praying for you. We're cheering you on, and just grateful that you are truly a woman who influences other women.
Oh, thank you. And again, thank you for having me as part of this. Man, it's humbling to see the power of God come full circle. I mean, as I said before, I tried to end my life at the age of 9 and 11. I had no idea that, 27 years later, I would be sitting across from you talking about how God has the power to redeem. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, let's get to filming. I'm excited.